After loading the camper for our trip, we left Colorado Springs shortly after lunch, thinking that we could get through the Denver area before the traffic got bad. However, that was not the case. We stopped at St. Vrain State Park near Firestone, Colorado for the first night. Our campsite backed up onto one of the several lakes in the park. On the far side of the lake was a flock of pelicans. We made use of the short driving day by cleaning and arranging items in the camper. After 3 long driving days, we arrived at the Lake Louise campground. We had a split reservation and set up in the first of 2 campsites reserved for our stay. That evening we took a drive up to beautiful Moraine Lake, which is nestled in the valley of the 10 Peaks. The Canadian Park System has a lodge at the lake with many cabins for rent. There is also a canoe rental for those who want to enjoy the beauty of this valley from the surface of the lake. The rock pile, which is the actual glacial moraine that forms the lake, calls for immediate investigation. The view from the top of the rock pile is called the $20 view because at one time it occupied the back of the Canadian $20 bill. The 10 peaks in this valley were originally named by Samuel Allen, an early explorer of this region, who simply referred to them as numerals 1 through 10 in the Nakota Indian language. The Nakotas were the primary Indian tribe of this area. Gradually, however, the peaks have been renamed in honor of noteworthy individuals, including Allen himself. Leaving Moraine Lake, we drove to Lake Louise. This is one of the most visited and photographed locations in all of Canada. This year marked the 150th anniversary of the Canadian Park System. Entry into all parks was free. This made the crowds much larger than normal. Lake Louise was named after the 4th daughter of Queen Victoria, Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, who was the wife of John Campbell, the 9th Duke of Argyll. He served as the Governor General of Canada from 1878 to 1883. His clan home is in Inveraray, Scotland. We had visited this location earlier in the year while traveling in Great Britain. While Lake Louise is quite beautiful, we thought that Moraine Lake was the more picturesque of the 2 areas. However, the lodge at Lake Moraine cannot begin to compare to the Fairmont Chateau located at Lake Louise. Today is a sightseeing day to the south of Lake Louise on the Bow River Parkway. This parkway parallels the Bow River and the more heavily traveled Trans-Canadian Highway. Our first stop is at the Coral Creek Pullout. Looking west across the river are good views of the mountains surrounding Lake Louise and Moraine Lake. A few miles further south at the Castle Mountain pullout are good views to the east of Castle Mountain. A short distance further down the road is the Snow Mountain overlook. These views are looking west across the Bow River Valley. The Johnston Canyon area was the primary reason for driving the Bow River Parkway. There is a developed trail that allows views of 7 waterfalls along Johnston Creek. The creek and canyon takes its name from a gold prospector who first explored this area in 1910. Walter and Marguerite Camp established a tea house at the mouth of the canyon in 1927 and began developing a trail to allow visitors to enjoy the beautiful scenery of the canyon. Today the canyon draws thousands of visitors each day. Much of the trail winds through pine forest with overlooks along the way. In areas where the canyon walls are narrow and steep, catwalks have been suspended over the creek to allow passage. Most people hike to the lower falls. Here a walkway extends over a pool at the bottom of the falls and will take visitors to a small cave that opens up to the cascading water of the falls. Continuing on the trail above the lower waterfall, you will pass 5 smaller waterfalls until you reach the upper falls. Here there is a catwalk that extends out into the canyon that allows visitors to view the upper falls. The trail continues to the top of the upper falls and beyond to 6 flint pots that are natural springs feeding the creek. Leaving the Johnston Canyon area, we continued south to the Lake Minnewanka driving loop. We had a picnic lunch near the visitor center. The native Indians called this lake the Lake of the Spirits, and early Europeans called it Devil's Lake. The town site of Minnewanka Landing was established in 1888. 2 cruise boats toured the lake at that time. Three dams have been built to impound water and increase the size of the lake. The first was built in 1895 to improve boating on the lake. The second dam was built in 1912 to power an electric generating plant. The current dam was built in 1941 and raised the level of the lake so much that the Minnewanka town site was flooded. We stopped to watch this small group of mountain goats after crossing the dam. Continuing on the driving route, we stopped briefly at the Johnson Lake recreational area where many people were camping and boating. From Johnson Lake, we headed into the town of Banff to stock up on supplies and to buy gas. We then drove up the Tunnel Mountain Road to an overlook to view the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, which was opened in 1888 by the Canadian Pacific Railroad. Our final stop of the day before returning to the campground was Bow Falls. This is a major waterfall on the Bow River, just prior to its junction with the Spray River. It was featured in the 1953 film River of No Return. We returned to the campground by the Bow River Parkway and were able to get better pictures of the Sawback Mountain than we could during the morning drive. Today we are taking a short drive north and west of Lake Louise to Takaka Falls and Emerald Lake. We traveled along the Trans-Canadian Highway until the Yoho Valley Road turnoff. This road follows the Yoho River to Takaka Falls. In the native Cree language, Takaka means it is magnificent. The waterfall is 991 feet from the top to the river basin below, with 850 feet of free fall. The flow of water during the summer months is relatively constant because the source is meltwater from the Daly Glacier. We had lunch here at the trailhead, and then I hiked to the base of the falls. Truly, this is a magnificent waterfall. Leaving Takaka Falls, we followed the Yoho River down to its confluence with the Kicking Horse River. At the confluence of the two rivers, the Yoho is actually the larger of the two, but after the confluence, the river becomes the Kicking Horse. Because the Yoho starts up valley at a glacier by the same name, its waters are siltier and less clear than that of the Kicking Horse. Kicking Horse River. We traveled further west on the Trans-Canadian Highway to the Emerald Lake Cutoff. Just 2 miles up this valley that follows the Kicking Horse River is Natural Bridge. The river has cut through the rock at this point and provides a nice area to carefully explore. It is the Kicking Horse River. We are on the Emerald Lake Road now, up the Kicking Horse Valley. Emerald Lake is the largest lake in the Yoho National Forest. There is a high-end lodge located on the shores of the lake. In summer months, you can hike the 3.2-mile trail that circumnavigates the lake or rent canoes. Located in a basin surrounded by the President Range of mountains, this lake has an ideal setting. Canadian guide Tom Wilson discovered this jewel in 1882. The color of the lake is due to the limestone powder suspended in the water. Today is Vicky's birthday, and it will be a long day of driving. We are headed north on the Icefills Parkway to Jasper and Malign Lake. Since we have to repeat part of this same route north on another day, we will concentrate on stops north of the Columbia Icefield. The scenery along this highway is absolutely breathtaking. You pass many lakes, peaks, and glaciers as you head north to Jasper. They are predicting that the glaciers will disappear from this area in another 20 to 30 years. It would be well worth the effort to visit this area before that should occur. Our first stop of the day was Tangle Falls. This multi-tiered cascade is adjacent to the highway with two parking areas opposite the falls. Several smaller cascades near the top of this 114-foot waterfall come together into a single stream that plunges over 3 additional tiers. You can climb all the way to the top of the waterfall, but there are several viewpoints along the way that offer good photography. Just north of Tangle Falls is a pullout overlooking Mount Stutfield and the Stutfield Glacier. The highway follows the Sumwapta River and provides great views of the Tangle Ridgeline looking back to the south. From the next pullout, you get good views of Mushroom Peak. On the east side of the highway, the endless chain ridgeline can be seen for several miles. The Malign Lake area lies directly behind this ridgeline, but unfortunately there are no roads over it to shorten the drive. The next major viewing area is Sumwapta Falls. This is actually a pair of waterfalls that have a combined drop of over 60 feet. Most visitors, however, see the upper falls as it is easy to hike to. The falls are fed by meltwater from the Athabasca Glacier. In the native Indian tongue, Sumwapta means turbulent waters. This is an apt description of the falls. Just north of the falls, the Sumwapta River joins with the Athabasca River. The highway follows this new river until you arrive at Athabasca Falls. The scenery continues to amaze along this section of the road. There is easy access to the waterfall from the Icefields Parkway. We enjoyed a picnic lunch at one of the many tables provided at the site by the Park Service. Paved trails lead to the falls from the parking lot. While the waterfall is only 80 feet tall, the amount of meltwater from glaciers that flows over the falls makes this an awesome sight. Many rafting companies begin their trips on the Athabasca River immediately below the waterfall. After leaving Athabasca Falls, we drove through the town of Jasper. All the electrical power was off throughout the town, so we continued on to the Moline Lake Road, stopping at an overlook to get a long-distance view of the town. We took a brief rest from driving at one of the Moline Canyon viewpoints. There is a hiking trail that runs along the rim of this canyon for several miles and crosses 7 bridges. We made a brief stop at Medicine Lake. A recent fire had damaged this area severely. We arrived at Moline Lake late in the afternoon for our reserved boat ride to Spirit Island. With a length of 14 miles and an average depth of 115 feet, this is the largest lake in Jasper National Park. It sits in a glaciated valley surrounded by tall peaks. An afternoon snow shower left these peaks streaked with snow and added to the beauty of the scenery. 3 glaciers are still visible from the lake. Moline is French for malignant or wicked, and was first used to name the lake by Father Pierre-Jean de Smet. The Moline River flows out of the south end of the lake and flows underground to Medicine Lake. The boat ride to Spirit Island provided some jaw-dropping scenery, with snow-dusted peaks and glaciers. With the cool temperatures and wind, it was invigorating to stand on the aft deck of the boat, to take pictures and to shoot video. This is an absolute must when visiting the Jasper National Park area. Spirit Island is one of the most photographed areas in all of Canada. The island is sacred to the native Indians of this area, and visitors are asked not to wade over to it. A short hike goes along the shoreline of the lake and gives wonderful views of the island, as well as the peaks surrounding the lake near its southern end. This has to be one of the most beautiful locations we have been blessed to see in all of our travels. It was a long drive from Lake Louise, but well worth it. On our way back to the lodge and boat ramp, we saw this moose feeding on the moss in the lake. After the long day of driving to Moline Lake, we decided to be a little lazy today. We wanted to go back to Moraine Lake to view it in morning light. However, after several attempts to find a parking space, we gave up on this idea and headed back to Lake Louise. The crowds were much worse today than our first trip to Lake Louise. Vicky explored the area around the chateau, while I hiked part of the trail to Lake Agnes. Today we travel back north to the Columbia Icefield Center to do our glacier discovery tour.
Start to notice a bunch of ice within all the rocks. All of this ice is being very well protected. You lose anywhere between 15 to 20 meters of ice every single year.
The vehicles we travel in are specially designed to travel on the ice of the glacier. They can handle up to a 35% grade and cost $1.3 million each. The meltwater from the glacier is just above the freezing temperature and very pure. We bottled some of it to drink while on the tour. There were several smaller glaciers on the sidewalls of the valley that generated some waterfalls as the ice melted. We were able to spend about 35 minutes exploring the surface of the glacier. During that time, the cold from the ice begins to seep through the soles of your shoes. This is the retreating edge of the Columbia Icefield. It is the largest remaining icefield in the Rocky Mountains, covering some 125 square miles and ranging in depth from 300 to 1,200 feet. We returned to the visitor center and transferred to a bus for the second part of our tour. The Glacier Skywalk was completed in 2014 at a cost of 21 million Canadian dollars. It extends out over the Sunwapta Valley, some 900 feet below. It provides great views of the river below and several cascades that descend into the valley. Leaving the Icefield Center, we headed back south over Sunwapta Pass. This is the dividing line between Jasper and Banff National Parks. We made a brief stop at the 1,200-foot tall Bridal Veil Falls. We stopped at the junction of Coleman Creek and the Sunwapta River for a picnic lunch. Continuing south back to Lake Louise, we had good views of Waterfowl Lake. At the Bow Pass summit, we had great views of Peyto Lake. Our final stop before heading back to the campground at Lake Louise was at Bow Lake. At Bow Lake, we had great views of the Crowfoot Glacier. We left our campsite at Lake Louise this morning a day early and headed to Glacier National Park back in the States. We pulled over Vermilion Pass and drove through the Kootenai National Park to Radium Hot Springs, where we ate lunch at a German restaurant. Our campground outside Glacier was difficult to find, and our campsite was even more difficult to set up. That evening we took a drive into the park along the North Fork Road. We were fortunate to observe a beaver family working in a creek along the side of this road. I stopped just long enough to get my fly line wet, but had no luck. We also stopped at a pullout to observe a major fire above McDonald Lake that eventually destroyed the 114-year-old Sperry Chalet. The next day we drove the Going to the Sun Road to St. Mary on the eastern side of the park. Our first stop was the McDonald Lodge that was built in 1913. McDonald Lake is fed by a creek of the same name. Just north of the lake there's a pull-out and short trail to McDonald Falls. This is a scenic area that provides opportunity for exploration. Continuing up the west side of Going to the Sun Road, we passed the Loop area and then the area known as the Weeping Wall. We stopped at the Sunrift Gorge pullout so that I could take a short hike down to Bering Falls. This was a pleasant hike that ended at a shady alcove where the stream dropped some 30 feet before feeding into St. Mary Lake. After a picnic lunch at the Sun Point area, we stopped at the Rising Sun Overlook for views of St. Mary Lake. We spent some time at the St. Mary Visitor Center before retracing our drive over Going to the Sun Road. The smoke from fires in Montana, Idaho, and southern Alberta were so bad that we decided to leave a day early and head to Yellowstone. We spent a smoky night on the Walmart parking lot in Missoula, and then a night in Livingston on the way to Yellowstone. Arriving the Thursday night before Labor Day weekend, we were able to get one of the last spots at the Norris campground that would accommodate our trailer. The Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone has always been one of our favorite areas of the park. We never fail to visit this area when we are in Yellowstone. While not as grand as the Grand Canyon, the colors of the walls of this canyon and the flow of the Yellowstone River make this more interesting to me than its Arizona counterpart. The Yellowstone is the last major river in the country that has not been dammed by the government. It flows out of Yellowstone Lake for several miles before it descends some 109 feet over this upper falls. There are good viewpoints on both sides of the river. But the major feature of the Yellowstone Canyon has to be the upper falls. Here the river narrows to only 70 feet as the water cascades down a drop of 308 feet. There are several other water features in the park, including this drive along the Firehole River Canyon. Another waterfall easily visible along the park road is Gibbon Falls. This section of the Gibbon River descends over the edge of the volcanic caldera that makes up much of Yellowstone. The wildlife is also a big draw to Yellowstone. We observed this buffalo herd in the Hayden Valley area. And of course the predictable eruption of Old Faithful is always enjoyable, especially when it is coupled with a meal at the Old Faithful Inn. Castle Geyser has one of the largest cones of any geyser in the park. It erupts about every 10 to 12 hours with a 90-foot geyser. The Beehive Geyser erupts every 11 to 14 hours and reaches a constant height of 200 feet during each event. The Grand Geyser System is the tallest fountain geyser in the park. It also has one of the longest eruption periods of any geyser. The main vent may erupt for 20 minutes or more, with the secondary vents erupting for 1 to 2 hours. While in the Old Faithful area of the park, we visited the Black Sand Basin. This area has several thermal features and gets its name from the black obsidian granules contained in the soil. The most prominent feature of this area is Emerald Pool. We also took a drive through the Fountain Paint Pots area along the Firehole Lake Drive. This road took us by the Great Fountain Geyser and Firehole Lake. We were able to relax at Yellowstone and catch our breath after a hectic schedule in Canada. We moved on to the Tetons, but the smoke from fires was so bad we only stayed one night before heading home.